السلام عليكم.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي من علينا بمواسم الخيرات وأبقى في أعمارنا أياما لنزداد من الحسنات، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد. Respected elders, my dear sisters and my dear brothers, I wanted to start, inshallah ta'ala, because of the extraordinary blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted us, to reflect on an important introduction. Sometimes the lessons in life do not hit home until they become very real and we experience them. It's not that merely we think about them or we reflect on what they mean in our lives, but we experience them firsthand. Many of us sometimes feel ourselves in a position perhaps of hardship, perhaps of difficulty, quite frankly sometimes also perhaps of despair. And as such we feel that our prayers are not potent. They don't act on something that we can measure. Sometimes we fear that they might have even fallen on deaf ears because we do not see the results and the wishes and dreams that we package in our prayers and ask for them to materialize so we can see them in our lives. And as such, it rattles us, and it grows in us perhaps doubt, perhaps concern, and all kinds of open questions to which there are no obvious answers. But I'll tell you something that you should consider to be the single most important message of today's service. In few hours from now, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted each and every one of us the right to live until Maghrib time arrives, for us to make our intentions to fast the month of Ramadan, it is none other than a miraculous moment. Because for many of us who pray as soon as the month of Rajab arrives, and we are constantly between the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in prayer, in contemplation, in prostration, begging of Him the right to be at that moment, and we say, Allahumma balighna Ramadan, He would have answered that prayer. Because others are not here to witness the same reality. Others who will not be here and who have not been here for quite some time this year to be the beneficiaries of this extraordinary gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us year after year. And so as we connect with this reality, the first thing that we need to summon in our souls for the souls to be present is the gift. Is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for His infinite wisdom, He saw it, that perhaps you, perhaps me, perhaps whoever is going to be alive between now and Maghrib time, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted them. It's not an accident that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted them to be present so they can make their intention and make the most of this extraordinary month. And I think that one of the things that the Quran speaks about in chastising terms that are not very generous, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the condition of people who have gone before us, are those who take Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for granted. Those who feel that they have a special covenant with Allah so they can bypass the requirements that are needed in order to be a beneficiary. And those from the nations that have gone before us, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has described their short-sightedness and their shortcomings by not being respectful of Him in the manner that they have behaved and in the manner that they have expected things from Him. وَلَا تَشْتَرُوا بِآيَاتِ ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا, the Quran says. Don't you trade with my signs, be they kawniya or munazzala, signs that are manifest in creation or signs that have been revealed to you in language. وَإِيَّايَ فَاتَّقُونَ, and verily show towards me the God consciousness and fear that is deserving of my majesty and my presence, is the teaching that comes to us in the Quran. So as you enter after Maghrib, in order to begin your journey in Ramadan, enter it with a sense of humility. Enter it with a sense of gratitude. Enter it with a sense of a person who's worthy of receiving the gift and takes that gift and recognizes the treasure of what it means and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen them to be there at that moment and present on that occasion. See, every morning, subhanallah al-Adim, I get behind the wheel of my car and I start the engine and it is still in the garage. And the one thing that I never forget, never ever forget, that I didn't sign a contract to be granted the right to return on that same day. I don't sit on some special list that exempts me from being a victim to the realities of life. And I tell you, it's a very humbling experience once you start thinking about it and not merely going through it as a mental exercise, much like the engine is warming up, but much like your reality is coming to life, to know, be careful. Tread gingerly in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this gift, however amazing it is, it's so incredibly fragile and it can go like this in an instant. And that's what it means to not take Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for granted. So we come here, and it seems like an easy walk or an easy drive to show up on Friday. But let me tell you what the Prophet ﷺ says about this moment. جاء في حديث أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه أنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خير يوم طلعت فيه الشمس يوم الجمعة. The best of days on which the sun has risen is the day of gathering, this day of Jumu'ah. فيه خلق آدم, it is a day on which our nature, our Adamic nature, what makes us human, the Adamic template that was stepped and repeated several times to make each and every one of us, then, now, and in the future for as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it, was because of a Friday. On a day like this is the anniversary of that creation that we celebrated. وَفِيهِ أُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةِ, it is the day in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from that creation that He has made and favored over all other creations, He says, today I am going to gift you your home. Enter therein into heaven. وَفِيهِ أُخْرِجَ مِنْهَا, and it is also the day that we have gotten to expand upon the experience that Adam had originally, which is to not limit to be limited into the divine protection of the heavens that sit up there in a place where we don't know where they sit, but to enter this life and still be a creature of Allah, a creature that recognizes Allah, that makes the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is conscious of His presence, and that celebrates the fact that it has emanated from Him. And every Friday we get to celebrate this. And when it is the Friday, obviously, that kicks off the start of Ramadan, it takes an incredibly new significance and new height. Why do we do all this? We do it, frankly, to center back, to awaken the things inside us that might fall into a deep slumber. And sometimes we kind of lose our way, and we forget to keep the main thing the main thing. Let me tell you a little story which happened to me personally, and it happens, I do believe, to every Muslim who have been granted the extraordinary privilege to visit the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether it is in Hajj during the season or in Umrah out of season, there is this experience for first-time visitors that go to Al-Haram al-Makki. You drop outside the sacred precinct and you start feeling some butterflies in your stomach, like it's like an imminent moment that's about to unfold in front of you. You can't contain your emotions, and things are really turning and revving up at very, very high rates inside you. And the further you get close, and the more your sense of excitement, of anxiety, of feeling that something ominous is about to happen, takes over and grabs hold of you. I mean, you literally feel it. It's not you think it. You literally feel it. And then, subhanAllah, you enter through one of the gates. And the energy goes up exponentially. And as you make your way through the corridors, and you haven't seen the Kaaba yet, and all of this mix of emotion is now really outpouring out of you. You kind of made it. You made it as a guest in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then there's this moment, a moment that has no equivalent in the life of a believer, where you pick your eyes up and you suddenly see this marvel, simple but extraordinarily awesome. Just a piece of blood cloth that comes through an angle and a perspective that doesn't allow you at first to see all of it. You begin to guess and divine where the position of the Kaaba is. And the more it reveals itself to you in its size and its majesty, and the more you feel reduced, and you feel attracted, and you feel brought in. And now you are in the land of what I call eye candy. You get in front of the real thing. All of the archways of Al-Masjid al-Haram are behind you, and you are in the middle of the precinct. And you see it right there in front of you. And you are transported into a whole other place. I know for a fact that for myself, I couldn't even remember of how I began the tawaf. Swept by the thing that goes around, which is called the crowd that is making this tawaf, you find yourself like a vortex sucked into it, and it takes you around. And you know why we can describe all of this? Is because we see it and we feel it. It's a sensorial reality in physical space where we see the Kaaba, we feel the Kaaba, we go around the Kaaba, and we connect to it as a physical object that is next to us. Let me share with you the second most important thing of this khutbah today. Ramadan is no less. Wallahi thumma wallahi thumma wallahi. Ramadan is no less. Actually, it gets better. Because Ramadan, you don't enter sacred space. You are not looking at an object. You are entering sacred time that makes it affordable to all of us. You don't have to go and spend now it's $10,000 to go and sit in one of these horrors that they call hotels now that they have built around the precinct, where they have drowned it into this modern architecture that literally comes out of hell. But alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of things because it's His house. So that affordability that bars the way for many of us to be able to afford that doesn't exist in Ramadan. Ramadan is an equal opportunity employer. Anybody who wishes to start, you make your niyyah, and as of Maghrib today, you enter into sacred space. So I invite you, inshallah ta'ala, to pay attention as these signs come towards you. And be careful of how we're going to invest our time and our resources when you exist in sacred time. One, the opportunity is time-bound. It's 30 days and it's going to go like that. Before you even think that it has started, you will find yourself wrapping up on the other end that it has also already ended. So be careful on the tragedy of waste. إن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال أتاني جبريل. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم is relating a story of one day Jibril عليه السلام who came to him and he said the following thing to him: يا محمد من أدرك أحد والديه فمات فدخل النار فأبعده الله. O Muhammad, know this and teach your people this, that whoever enters sacred time and has one of their parents in their custody and does not take care of their parent, they lost it. They're done. وَلَيَّذُ بِاللَّهِ. And then Jibreel asks the Prophet ﷺ to do the following thing: قُلْ آمين فَقُلْتُ آمين, which means that the Prophet ﷺ ratified and accepted the responsibility of the prayer and committed to pass on the teaching to us. Then Jibreel tells him the second wasiyah. قال يا محمد من أدرك شهر رمضان فمات فلم يغفر له فأدخل النار فأبعده الله. قل آمين فقلت آمين. Know, O Muhammad, that whoever has been granted the favor to enter the month of Ramadan. Adraka is a very, very, very complex term in the Arabic language that cannot be rendered in one word. Whoever has been granted the favor and the privilege to enter the month of Ramadan, فَمَاتَ فَمَنْ يُغْفَرْ لَهُ, and happens to pass, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't grant that person forgiveness. فَأَبْعَدَهُ اللَّهُ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rebukes him and pushes him way out of his rahmah. Say Ameen, and the Prophet ﷺ says Ameen. And then the third and the last one, قَالَ وَمِنْ ذُكِرْتَ عِنْدَهُ, and whenever your name of Muhammad ﷺ is mentioned in his presence, فَلَمْ يُصَلِّ عَلَيْكَ, and doesn't have the reflex to immediately recognize the sanctity of your name, and doesn't pay respects by saying sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, فَمَات, and then loses his life after that, فَدَخَلَ النَّارِ فَأَبْعَدَهُ اللَّهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will also rebuke and push that person away. قُلْ آمين فَقُلْتُ آمين, and the Prophet ﷺ concluded the hadith. See, very often I hear this. I try to pay significant attention, and I actually take this very, very seriously. When I ask for feedback and some of the brothers and sisters who are incredibly generous with their opinion and with their feedback, and say the things that they wish they would hear or the things that they would like to see done differently from Khutbah al-Jumu'ah. And one of the things that comes back is to say, why is it that the timing in Khutbah al-Jumu'ah is not good? We hear about things when it is after the fact. We hear about things that are completely out of sync. Can't we have some curriculum that is organized around the principle where we can make the most benefit of the investment of time in front of the Imam? Subhanallah, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. You're absolutely right. It's your right to demand that, and it's the obligation of the Khatib to deliver that. It is our obligation to give you what is called timely advice and timely teaching. How good is teaching after the fact? How good is advice when the event has passed? Of course, it's worthless. Yeah, there is always a benefit, something that can be derived from it, but the idea here is to empower and prevent, not to play catch up and waste everybody's time. And that is, inshallah, the spirit in which I'm sharing today's advice. So, inshallah ta'ala, I can put myself and put all of us in front of the cart, so we are driving rather than chasing it, breathless, unable to catch up with anything, and unable to organize our lives the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes us to see them organized. That was my second point in the khutbah. I'm going to come to my third. This one is usually what I call my favorite joke to tell, which is not meant to be from this member, an invitation for people to start laughing at what I'm saying. It's quite hilarious to hear sometimes Muslims describe and pitch to non-Muslims what Ramadan is. And roughly speaking, it always follows the same model. For a period of 30 days, we starve ourselves to death from food. We starve ourselves to death from water. We go completely sleepless, and that's how we celebrate that we are good Muslims. And it's very disturbing. It's very, very disturbing to present Ramadan like this. Because the one thing it's not is exactly that. It's everything else but that. So what is it about? So I'd like to invite you, inshallah, with me today, inshallah, with the nasiha being first to me and then to the rest of all of us, to reflect on the siyam in the following way. It will be insightful for the first time, perhaps in our history, to think of the Sawm as connected to the Shahada. Obviously, it's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. The reason for which pillars are pillars that are made up of a family of structures that support load is because any one of them that fails can cause others to not function properly. The insight of our Shahada is quite extraordinary because all of the creeds of all of the religions compared to ours do not have the equivalent of it. We're the only ones that in order to establish the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have a 2-part creed recitation. Ashhadu Allah, Allah, ilaha, and then we conclude the sentence by saying, illallah. I bear witness that there is no reality, no power, nothing that is worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the exception is the reality that is worthy of worship, that is Allah. And what I found always insightful in that Shahada is that it permeates all of the other 4 pillars remaining. Which means that before you set up on your journey, you gotta clean up your house. You gotta make room for purity to come in your life. Piling on, adding the stuff on the stuff, the Quran has equally been not very generous to past nations that have spent all of their time. You have a rotten foundation and you just add stuff to it. And you claim that that's called accumulation of knowledge. That's not our way. Our way is you gotta make room. You gotta make room for things to come into the right place. So I suggest that this Ramadan, when we apply the Siyam, we apply it to things that are transformative beyond the conversation of food and drink. So we can learn to feel the heartbeat of our hearts, to hear ourselves think, to feel ourselves breathe, and take a serious moment. As a result, my recommendation today, inshallah, is to apply abstaining to things that you might not have thought about before, that are part of the prescription of completing your month of Ramadan the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to complete it. So here is the first question. Can you abstain? Can you make a pledge in this Ramadan that you will abstain from mediocrity? Our ummah is getting killed by that. Can you abstain from settling for less? Our ummah is getting killed by that. Our children are totally wasted and lost. Can you abstain in this Ramadan from toxic behavior and toxic speech? That would be a breakthrough. That every single time that the words form and they are about to shoot out, that you catch them in a net and you say, for you, I have a gift today. I'm gonna wrap something around you, attach you to a very, very weighty piece of rock, drive to the Boston Harbor and throw you into the harbor. Because I'm not gonna let you come out from your mouth. Because we are in Ramadan. This maqam is not worthy of that behavior. That would be an interesting way to fast this year. I think if we can abstain from our vices and making excuses for our addictions. Yes, alhamdulillah that our community is not addicted to substance abuse. But make no mistake about it, we are addicted to other things that are equally destructive to our humanity. Egos, sticking our noses in things that do not concern us, looking at other Muslims and not wishing them well. These are pretty nasty things that we could clean up and do a much better job when we are in a state of fasting, because they become easy pathologies to go after and fix them. SubhanAllah, also, it's very important to understand that we engage in this, we shouldn't feel a sense of burden or a sense of inability to achieve, because we can. I remember reading once, and I apologize that my Japanese is inexistent, and I believe it's called something like Soku Shinbutsu, which is a very interesting term that you don't even need to remember, but the story behind it is the story that you need to remember. In a number of Buddhist monk sects, in order for someone to be elevated, to be the person that accepts people's prayer to become a Buddha, one of the things that the monks have to do to themselves is to engage in a form of fasting where they go into a cave and they literally starve themselves until they become mummified. And they carry a little bell while they are in isolation in their grotto. And as their body passes autophagy, it starts to not only eat the fat, but eats the muscle and the bone, and literally their skin collapses on them, and they expire in their final breath without intervention from another human being, and they actually stay in that condition, and when they no longer ring the bell, it means that they have actually passed, that the disciples of that monk go and extract the body, and if they find that the body has been self-mummified, they elevate him into a status of Buddha. Subhanallah al-Adim is all I can say. Subhanallah al-Adim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes this deen easy. That's not at all the fasting that is expected from us. That's not at all the fasting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put ourselves through torture. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this body in order to make the most out of it, and this intellect in order to make the most out of it, and this soul in order to make the most out of it, and this relationship in order to make the most out of it. So we don't have to subject ourselves to such horrors. And I love the fact that in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it beautifully and more eloquently than I can ever dream of saying it. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, he says, وَجَاهِدُوا فِي اللَّهِ حَقَّ جِهَادِهِ, and strive for the sake of Allah the way that Allah deserves your sacrifices. هُوَ اجْتَبَاكُمْ وَمَا جَعَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ. He has chosen you and He has not made religion a burden on you. That's not the design, that's not the intent, that's not what you have to subject yourself to. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is here to make you fulfill your own dreams. He's not here in order to extract a tax toll from you. So don't you worry about that. So now we come to the final point of the khutbah, which is the part of the affirmation on which we close. My dearest elders and respected elders, my dearest sisters and my dearest brothers, after we put down the excuses that we make for ourselves about why we can't do it, or why it's too hard, or why I don't have time for this, after we put down all of these things and we say, oh Allah, labbaik, I'm here, Allah, for your sake. Help me find my way. I would say that for this year, I have only one piece of advice. Because any Muslim who has lived through 2024 and part of 2025, and who has witnessed the deliberate, calculated extermination of a beautiful people, not made out of cartoons, made out of our flesh and blood, our brothers and our sisters, our mothers and our babies, and our fathers and our grandfathers and our grandchildren. And I mean by the word our, I mean that. It's not a polite way of speaking about those victims. Anybody who has gone through this, and who has gone through it as a first-hand witness, and has not come out transformed, there's something terribly wrong. There's something terribly wrong if you haven't come out transformed. If it's just, you know what? It's another one in the record of the carnages that are around us, because it's not. That's what our humanity is all about, is to tune when something is of significance. And it is my prediction, my hope, and my prayer that this Ramadan will not be missed and will enter Muslim history and human history as a pivotal moment for change of better things to come. Because the track on which humanity has been going is not good. Not good. And we need something different. So what is this thing that we need different? What we need different is the thing that we can do and that we can impact. And where we can actually cause something that makes a difference. The root cause of all of these things is due to the despicable and petty differences that exist amongst Muslims to cause our disunity. It made us pray to the worst kind of human beings who are merely paper tigers, but who feel that they can roar and they can threaten with impunity. And as such, my recommendation and my priority is one. I'm a teacher at heart. I have always thought that's all I know how to do in my life. And I learned something in the pedagogy of teaching If you do not have a theme and you don't retain a theme and you don't harp on that theme constantly, the chances of that theme being understood or internalized is zero. So the theme I would recommend for this month of Ramadan is the one that comes from the Quran, from Surah Al-Anfal. وَأَصْلِحُوا ذَاتَ بَيْنِكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this beautiful surah says, it's verse number 1 in Surah Al-Anfal, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ. Be conscious of your Creator. وَأَصْلِحُوا ذَاتَ بَيْنِكُمْ. Be mindful of Allah. Settle your affairs and obey Allah and His Messenger. So your pledge and your investment is, what am I going to do as a believer that comes to this community, that lives in my community, that has gravitas, impact, that I offer something to my community that will make this Ramadan special. Make the unity of our community and of our ummah a central theme to build a long, lasting, enduring, and empowering relationship. Only then we can start building, and without it, we have nothing else and nowhere else to go. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه فهو المستغفر. الحمد لله ثم الحمد لله وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. I have been given a request for one of our brothers a long time attendee of the center, Dr. Siddiq Abdullah, who's a former member of the center and who had a difficult surgery, and he's requesting our full dua inshallah to help with his full recovery. اللهم رب الناس اذهب الناس اشفي انت الشافي شفاء لا يغادر سقما. اللهم رب الناس اذهب الباس اشفي انت الشافي شفاء لا يغادر سقما ابدا. اللهم رب الناس اذهب الباس اشفي انت الشافي شفاء لا يغادر سقما ابدا. اللهم اشفيه اللهم عافيه. I was also asked to make a very important announcement. As I'm sure many of you know, the rhythm of the business in the off-season is to only have 2 prayers per day, one in Fajr and one in Isha. But as of tomorrow, inshallah, starting from tomorrow, inshallah, there will be 5 daily prayers that will be held in this masjid here. And your presence would be very much appreciated if you can make it, inshallah ta'ala, because the services will be available to you. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the pleasure of being part of this month of Ramadan. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this month from us. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us with its presence and bless our families. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help our ummah, to gather our ummah, to unite our ummah, and to bring our ummah together, inshallah, to His way. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His guidance. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to return our children to their deen. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cleanse our hearts and make us come together as a community. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be witness that all that we do and all that we say is sincerely for His sake. And I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا واقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
استووا معتدلين. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.